Hello, and welcome to today's Next Level Love interview series. Sorry, I was in the tech in the back end there, just pressing some things I'd forgotten to press. Hi, I'm Katie Phillips. I founded the School of Self-Love, and usually today I'd probably be doing a couple with Katie show. However, I've taken over the show and we've been running actually for 2 weeks now, the Next Level Love interview series. And I've been interviewing the most wonderful women who've been sharing their stories on how they found love in part 2 or act 2 of their life. And that was my story. And I wanted to reach out and find women around the world. And we really have had women from around the world, from all different backgrounds, sharing how they met their soulmate at a time in their life when a lot of women kind of feel like it's not going to be possible, like maybe we've missed the boat, or we come with too much baggage, or it's too late for me. Like, there's a lot of beliefs that start like popping their head up over the age of 40. These women are busting all the myths that it's hard to find love over 40. So we're here to inspire you. And today I've got gorgeous Clarissa Kristjansson with us. Hello, honey. How are you?
I am really good, and I am delighted, Katie, to be here to share, how I found love at quite a late age.
Yeah, I know. These are such fun stories. So, all right, let's just a quick little bit of background. Where in the world are you right now? Because I'm proving that this is global. This is, where are you right now?
Indeed, Katie. I live on the west coast of Sweden, about couple of hours north of the Norwegian border, south of Norwegian border, I should say. Yes.
Amazing. And I know, because we've spoken before, and I was lucky enough to be a guest on your podcast. You've moved around the world. I can hear your British accent, but I know that during this interview we're going to hear a bit of an Aussie accent, because you spent quite a bit of time in Australia as well, right?
That's right. I mean, I was born in London. My mother's Swedish, which is why I have a connection to here. But I did indeed live for nearly 14 years in Sydney.
Yes, I know. And we miss it, don't we?
We do. We miss the sun and we miss the beautiful beach. I can't complain.
Do. And the weather. I know. We can't complain. We have good lives and we miss Sydney. All right, honey. And what is do you want to share a little bit of background on the work that you're doing in the world?
Thank you so much, Katie. Well, I am a menopause mentor and coach. My passion is to make sure that women really get the support they need, that we're aware that we have mind, body, and soul, because this is a huge life transition where we're often left to struggle alone, and we don't have to. And so part of it's the podcast, but part of it's also people coming and working with me in groups and one-to-one to really say can be a time of great opportunity in our life to grow and to really find ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to just name drop your podcast as well?
I can do. It's called Thriving Through Menopause. So we're on every station. So check us out. And as Katie said, she's been a guest and she was wonderful.
I was lucky enough to be a guest. Yeah, it's fab. All right. Yeah, you're doing amazing work in the world. So important. I'm so glad you incorporated the word soul as well just now, because I mean, for me, my menopause journey, it's a deeply soulful journey, and it's a real returning home to me. So while front of mind is the physical stuff and the emotional stuff that's all going on, and I'm managing at the moment, I'm managing to manage it naturally. It's a soul journey for sure. And I truly believe, as I know we agree on, that it's a time in our life when our body is literally saying to us, okay, it's a gear change now. And we can shift up a gear or we can shift down a gear, but we have a choice. And for women like us, we're choosing to make part 2 like amazing. We're choosing to thrive, right?
Absolutely. This is such an amazing time. I'm 61 in a few weeks' time, and I can tell you that life has never felt better, but it is a conscious choice to do that because I could have been the woman I was before, which I'm sure we're going to hear more about as I talk through this.
Well, do you want to, should we just start there? Tell me about the woman that you were before.
Well, you know, I was a very frightened woman. I mean, I recognize that I had a lot of fear. I had a very difficult childhood, and it started there. A childhood where you had to conform. And I can say that, you know, my parents are both no longer alive, but my dad was a very controlling person. I would have said he had a very narcissistic personality. He left when I was about 10 years old, but he'd keep coming in and out of your life, messing about with it. And so we had to all the time be, you know, careful, whatever that is, that we didn't overstep any boundaries, because he was always like threatening my mom that he'd take us away from her. And that sets your ground rules of how you live your life and the risks you're prepared to take. And you conform. And it also set me up with some very strange relationships to men, quite frankly, which didn't serve me very well as I got older and into the whole scene of dating and trying to build relationships. So that's where my life started. And that was a horrible space to start from.
I can imagine, because I can imagine that the way you learned, you know, you were programmed and conditioned to relate to men, to relate to the masculine, was quite disempowered.
Absolutely. My mother was very afraid of him. She was afraid of him. And in reality, I don't think half of what he said he would have carried out. You know, today we would have pulled his bluff. But, you know, we've got to remember women's rights in the 1970s were very different to women's rights today. Men had a lot more power over women's lives. And so I had a very strange relationship with men. And I had really, apart from my uncle who lived here in Sweden, so I saw him twice a year, no good male role models, shall we say. Yeah. I grew up learning completely to distrust the masculine. And I never really fully trusted men. I never was able to fully give myself to a man and trust that it would be okay, and trust that I wouldn't lose myself in the process as well, you know. Yeah. So how far back shall we go with your love story? I mean, I guess it would be interesting to know, I mean, were you married? Did you have children? Like, should we go back there? We can go back there. Actually, I got married for the first time when I was 23 years old. I actually don't talk about that a lot, but he was a much older man. You can get where that's coming from.
Okay.
Today, I would say he was probably a very lovely person, and he wasn't a bad person. He was a good person, but a little bit set in his ways. And that's where it came apart. We didn't have any children with each other. He had 2 older children, very nice children. But our relationship was maybe not one of equals. And then I got into my career, I did a PhD, and I wanted to go my path, and my path and his path were not the same. And he came.
Well, you were at totally different stages in life by the sounds of it as well.
Yes, he was probably in his late 40s. I was in my mid to late 20s. And I just wanted to grow my career, and I got offered a fantastic job. And I said, look, I'm taking this job and because it's exciting. And he was very disappointed. He said, well, I can organize you a job where I work. That would be nice. And we could go to work together each day. And I was like, no.
We just carve my own path
to each other again. We never saw or spoke to each other again after the relationship ended. It was like we just drew, you know, a line across it, and that was fine.
And I think, you know, I'm a big believer that every relationship we have is serving a purpose, and I'm a big believer that that purpose is usually very linked to healing something that's looking to be healed. I think we can do our most profound healing when we're in relationship, and the relationship kind of sparks up what is looking to be, you know, paid attention to. I can imagine some of your dad's stuff came up in that relationship.
I would expect so. And there was me then eventually breaking away from being controlled. And I think that's where I learned to kind of walk a path that was a little bit my own journey. and wanting to do my own thing and becoming a person in my own right, having had a controlling father and mother. I wasn't used to making the decisions. And in the end, I was making some very big decisions about how I wanted at least the career aspect of my life to be.
Yes. Yeah. So you're individuating from mum and dad, and you're giving yourself permission to move forward in a way that felt really good for you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So what age are we at now? And then who came into your life next?
I was just coming up for 30.
Okay.
And I moved. I had a fantastic career. I was working for a big multinational. I was traveling the world. I was growing the career ladder. And I wasn't really dating because I was busy doing other things. I had girlfriends and I was traveling places, and I was excited about life. Yeah. But, we sort of get to the point and think, oh, maybe it would be nice to date someone. And you have that little, we can all relate to that one. And so I went to a few dating things, like dinner dating. That was very popular in the UK at the time, to meet people and dinner date. And that's where I met my second husband. Okay. And he was a very different kind of person to other people that I'd known. He has and still today has a huge personality. Like, he is, one of my friends described him, if you're British, you'll laugh about this, as hail fellow, well met. He's kind of one of these jolly people with a drink and all that. Of course, he's not really like that. That's all a front. But we got together. He was in the middle of a very messy, acrimonious divorce. And he had 2 children who are even today 2 very damaged individuals because of the friction and the tension that they live. And it's very, very sad. And they have their own issues with their own partners and stuff. And they were 2 very messed up children. And I actually ended the relationship because I said, until you can resolve this, we can't be together. And I said that. And then I walked away to find out about a month later that I was actually expecting my son, Thomas. Oh. And I sort of stood there and I thought, what do I do? It was a huge decision, and I actually decided that I would tell him. And part of that was because I'd never really had a proper father myself. I thought that Thomas deserved to have a dad. Well, that's not the right reason to build a longer term relationship with somebody, as I was.
But I understand, and I've experienced something very, very similar. So I really hear you.
Yeah. So we got married. I nearly backed out on the day of the wedding. And went through very what I now realize was postpartum depression after Thomas was born.
Gosh.
And I was, I didn't feel very well at all. I felt like somebody had suddenly trapped me into a box. I found being at home with a small baby very hard. And I'm incredibly grateful for my mum that she was there and was able to support me. But I went back to work. And when Thomas was about 5, my husband, who then was a big dairy farmer, decided he would sell the farm, and he would take a business that he was building into a real business. And I agreed to support him. I thought that was all good, but it put a tremendous strain on our relationship because his life became all about this goddamn innovation is all I can say. People say you should be obsessed about your business, but not to the expense of your family, your friends, your everything. And that's what happened. And then, of course, he went bankrupt. And a lot of people do have cash flow issues with the business. And we ended up losing our house. And my mum was taken into hospital, and then she was put into an old people's home for people they're called elderly, mentally infirm or disabled. And so she had diagnosed with dementia. So my whole life just crashed in one go. And I was kind of like...
Your son was how old at that point?
About 6.
6. And you were?
I was 43 going on 44.
Right.
And I felt like somebody had pulled a complete rug over everything. Yeah. And I gave up work. I'd given up my job. And I was by that time very senior because I couldn't balance my mum particularly with all all the issues with working so hard. I was traveling all the time, and I had offices in Holland and offices in London, and I was living in the northwest of the UK. And I just thought, well, I can't sustain that without more help.
Yeah.
And everything crashed. And in 2004, my mother died. She died of a massive stroke. Absolutely, out of blue. She was only 78, so she really wasn't very old. And I was left there with a small child, with a husband whose business had gone bankrupt, whose solution to that was to lock himself in his office and drink. Basically, that's what he did. So everything in my life was just chaotic. And I don't think I processed that at that time, how low I was. And I don't think I realized at that time that I'd gone into perimenopause.
I was about to say that's all coinciding with all of these massive hormonal shifts, which for some women, just to caveat, they don't even notice. I mean, I've asked my husband's mum about when I went into perimenopause. I asked her lots of questions because my mum's not allowed to ask. And she kind of didn't even really know what I was talking about. She's like, just came and went.
Yeah.
I mean, I think your own self-awareness plays a role as well. I mean, I genuinely actually believe some women don't have such a conscious relationship with their body to really notice the changes. But for those of us that really get hit with it, there's no denying that there's something going on.
No.
Yeah. So, okay. So and were you aware of that? Did you understand what was going on in your body?
Absolutely not. I mean, I had an openly say horrendous periods at the beginning, just horrific.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what's going on here? And I don't think I even had the time to think I better go to a doctor or do something about it.
You're in survival mode at that point. Yeah. So
I was
get on with it.
I was just trying to make sure that, we had a roof over our heads, that we were getting fed, that Thomas was okay. And I mean, my whole focus was him. But after my mum died, I thought to myself, damn this, I'm going back to work, because at least if I have a full-time job, I've got some anchor and some stability. And that's how I ended up in Sydney, because there were no jobs in I was looking for jobs, and their jobs were in places I didn't want to live, or the money was appalling. So somebody said to me, why don't you try going overseas? And I said, okay, I'll go overseas. And I said to Michael at the time, we're going overseas. I said, you sort out how you're going to manage this business, but I've got to go back to work, and this is what's on the table. So I was being quite strong.
Wow.
And he said, yes, I agree. And I got a job in Sydney. We packed up the house.
So you and your son on your own went?
No, he came with me. Michael at that stage arrived with me and said that he was prepared to give Australia a go. 3 weeks after we arrived, he decided that he didn't want to be there and returned to the...
It's not for everyone.
No, it wasn't. And he certainly wanted to be back in the British countryside. He's a very British person, and he couldn't see any appeal, and I loved it. So we then, decided to end our marriage. It was very tense, very, very tense. I can tell you it was very tense. But I was very low by then. I was perimenopausal. I was coping in a new country, in a new job, with a child who was taking time to adapt. I didn't say I think Thomas took to a duck like to water at all. It took him a lot. And he'd been through a lot with grandma dying and all this chaos.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And I think that at that stage, I just wanted a man to save me.
Oh my gosh. So what now? Wanted a man to save you. Okay.
Yes, I thought, well, if I could find a nice man, I could be saved from all this, which is kind of backwards, isn't it, Katie, when you think about it now? But
what we know now, but I can imagine, so this is where you were at this point in your life.
Absolutely, that was exactly where I was at, in this country that felt a little bit strange. I didn't know anybody, I didn't have any friends. I was just putting one foot in front of the other. Work was getting better. And so I had a little bit of stability, but that was about it. And so I started to date online. Well, have I learned about online dating and the toxicity that
Well, also dating Aussie guys. I mean, Aussie guys is a whole other ball game as well.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
God love you, Aussie men, and I do love many Aussie men, and yeah, and it's a different ball game.
It's a different, and I've come from a sort of European Swedish background. I have a very different way of being.
Yeah, so different.
It really worked terribly well, to be openly honest. I dated a lot of people who had a lot of issues, but I also learned how toxic dating apps are. So if anybody's watching those or on those, you think social media is addictive, they're horrendous. You know,
more so now, I would say, as well, because the technology, algorithms and whatnot have become so sophisticated.
Yeah,
they're designed to because part of my look, I'm no expert on dating apps. Just to preface this, it's absolutely not my expertise. My expertise is the inner work. But I have a guy called James Priest. He's a celebrity dating coach, and he coaches and hosts a masterclass inside my Daring and Mighty Love mastermind group. So these are the women that I'm working with to help them call in their soulmate, which is nothing about calling in your soulmate. It's all about calling in yourself. But this class and the coaching he does is so fantastic around dating apps and so on. And he does actually part of the work we do with him is, you know, he does explain just how addictive these apps are. They're designed to keep you on, keep you addicted, and have you fail.
Oh yes.
That's actually how they're designed. But and I met my husband on a dating app, and I'm super glad for that dating app. So it's not that they might be designed to fail, but I'm a big believer that the way your guy comes in is the way he's going to come in, and if it's an app, so be it. But there's miraculous ways that you'll be drawn together, you know. So it's Kellyanne saying she's not enjoying the dating apps. Filtering through people like a cattle market is not for me. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways and approaches of being on an app that can have it feel aligned and good for you. And it has to, right? It has to feel good for you. If you're forcing it, it's not the way to approach it. So you were okay. So you just before we carry on with your story, I'm interested to know, because here you are, a woman in your 40s in a new country with a son, feeling like you need a man to save you. What did you believe about your chances of meeting somebody?
Oh, well, I'm an eternal optimist.
Yeah, great.
I was like, oh, yes, I'm going to meet somebody lovely, and he's going to have a fantastic house and a boat. And I just brushed all the toxicity and the negative away. You know, I seriously thought that was quite possible for me. I think as time wore on, I began to become a lot more cynical and hardened towards this dating game. But in the start, I was very open to meeting someone. And of course, I did meet lots of men, you know, but they were just and I think they were also with their own issues. So I wasn't sending out the right signals. So I was attracting men who were not really available and men who had equally as many issues as I did to resolve.
Right. Yes. And you're speaking to sort of the fundamental principles of most of my work. And that is, when it comes to calling in love, it's about becoming the vibrational match to who you're calling in, because we're all energy, right? And our energy signature attracts a like energy signature. Like attracts like. So okay, so they weren't very available. You probably weren't particularly available to yourself. You were being called, by the sounds of it, to come home to you in some way. And they had some toxic stuff going on, which meant you probably had some healing to do.
Definitely. And it carried on like that for quite a while. And I think that was that thing, that they were never fully available. There was always that pulling away. And probably in reality, deep down, I was pulling away because, you know, I had a lot of responsibility with Thomas too. And as he got older, I had to start thinking about, well, where does he fit in the picture? Who would I really want to introduce him to? he needs a lot of my attention. He was struggling with his own things. And I think that's the reality, that he was also struggling with who he was, what was happening in his life. And then at 14, he decided to come out and tell everybody he was gay. And that has its own ramifications for me as a parent. And that's when I started to pull away from a lot of this dating.
Yeah. Well, you're speaking to something I hear quite often with women who they think they're ready and they think they want to be with someone and they're doing all the things and they're out and they're dating. And the complaint is, I'm not finding available men. On some level, they're not available. And so then when you do a little bit of inquiry, you start to discover, well, really, how available are you? And you start to notice if there's fears going on around, well, I fear blended families. I fear the impact on my child. I fear my ability to be all I need to be for my child and be in a relationship. I fear they're going to drain my bank account. I feel like, if we have all of this stuff going on, it actually makes us unavailable. Yeah. So we think, our brain, we think we know what we want, but our heart and our emotional stuff is like, yeah, not really. You can all stay away. I don't trust you yet. Yeah.
I'm not ready to have you full time in my life is probably what came through more and more. So at that time, I was also obviously still struggling with perimenopause. I developed a lot of anxiety issues.
Because do you think that was linked to perimenopause, the anxiety?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was classic perimenopausal anxiety, which is what I encounter with more than 50% of my clients too today. This anxiety that comes out of nowhere, that keeps you awake at night. So you become exhausted, so you're more anxious. It's a vicious cycle for so many women. And what I then saw really for myself was that I couldn't really cope very well. I was becoming not well, and physically, in terms I had very high blood pressure and I was struggling to sleep. I was anxious. I had an anxiety attack in the office, and I just had to say enough is enough now. Now I have to stop. I've had a warning signal that I'm not well. I need to change my life. After I'd cried on the street in Sydney on the phone to a friend. And I went downstairs and I said, I can't do this job. I can't do this anymore. And I was like sobbing. And sometimes I think you get a little divine message and you're not expecting that message.
Oh, yeah.
And I've told this a few times that I'd been on a training course to do with social media. So it had absolutely nothing to do with spirituality or self-development. But the woman who ran it had the most amazing energy. She lit up this room. And as I stood there on the street, and her name came into my head out of nowhere, Heather. I'm thinking, what am I thinking about her? And I went to my desk and I, drew up my Google and I Googled her, and I could see she was involved in something called Open Ground. And I didn't know what that was, but it turned out to be mindfulness-based stress reduction training. And their head offices were in Waverley and I lived in Bondi. So if you know that part of Sydney, you're literally one suburb from each other.
Yes. Wow. That's amazing.
I know. And I went to their training course, and it was a big turning point for me to be in a space with a lot of other people and to realize that I wasn't alone in the way that I felt. Lots of other people were struggling with their own issues. Some people's issues were much more serious than mine. And that led to me being introduced to the group that I trained to become a mindfulness practitioner with, which was Breathworks. And it brought me into having to self-reflect and to stop and start to reflect about who I was, what I wanted out of my life, where I was going. And eventually it led to a conversation about self-compassion. Not unsurprisingly, because that was a big chunk of Breathworks work, is to work very deeply in compassion. And when we got to that piece, of course, I struggled. I couldn't come into relationship with what was needed. And my mentor, Karen, said to me, did you just skip over these bits or something? She's very direct. And I was like,
yeah.
No. And she said, I think you need to work here. This is where you need to put your time and your energy. And that's exactly what I did. And it made a huge difference. And I had a book called, I think it's called the Journey to Self-Compassion. It's written by one of the leading self-compassion psychologists, Kristjansson, and I loved that book. And that had so many practices for me to self-reflect and to do. And every lunchtime I'd go into the botanical gardens in Sydney and do a little bit of work. It's a beautiful spot.
Oh, I used to go and I used to play under the fig trees in the botanical gardens when I was a little girl. Yeah. So you would sit there and do the self-compassion work? Yes.
Every single lunchtime. And it was just very anchoring for me. And that's really when I got to a point when I decided that I would leave this corporate role. It wasn't serving me anymore. I cut off every dating app. I actually cut everything like that off for 5 years. I just literally made a decision to not date, to detox from every single dating app, not to look at anything, and to focus on myself.
Wow. So how did it feel? That's a really powerful decision. How did it feel to make that decision?
Do you know, by the time I got there, I was ready. I could see that I wasn't ready. I wasn't attracting the right men. I was turning into becoming a person that I didn't want to be. I wasn't being a compassionate, kind person to people I was meeting. I was becoming very transactional. And that's not who I want to be and not who I am. And I realized that I had reached the end of the road, and I had other things that I needed to work on, to focus on becoming an accredited practitioner, to spending more time meditating, working with my yoga, and also making sure that Thomas passed the HSC, which, if you know anything about end of year school exams in Australia, they're brutal.
They are brutal.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. We've got some music here because my husband's turned up the sound.
Well, there now, I can't hear it.
No, you got it. That's good. Because he has no boundaries when it comes to that. But that's what I did. And then after that period, that's when I reflected. Thomas moved to Holland to live in the Netherlands. And I said, do I want to be here in Australia anymore, or is it time to build a different life closer to my family? And that's exactly what I did.
Okay, so he moved back for his studies, and you came back as well.
Yeah.
When you made that very powerful decision to be there for you and not date and do your healing work and your training and so on, did it ever worry you that you were like the time was ticking, clock was ticking, and every day that you weren't online was another day missed? It didn't bother you?
No, by then I had realized that that wasn't important to me anymore. I'd never dated with the aim of having another family or anything like that. That was already for me. I'd had one child, and one child is probably, I'm not massively maternal. I've never wanted a big family or anything like that. But I had some pretty rough experiences with some people, and I did not want that in my life anymore. And I was gaining a better sense of self-respect. And that this is not what I want. This is not who I want to be. So no, let's cut this. And I didn't miss it at all. And I was amused when I did open those apps up again here in Sweden, in a very different country, how similar they were.
That's just That's really interesting. So you'd made a decision had you made a decision, I'm just not going to date, or had you made a decision, I don't need to be with anybody ever again? Or was it not that extreme?
I don't think it was that extreme. It was just I need space to work on me. And I was saying, this isn't, my life doesn't depend on me being with someone else. I've got my life and I'm important. That when I'd reached that point of putting me at the center, I wasn't being controlled by anything. I was making my own choices.
Yes. Oh my God. I relate to this so much. I remember when I went and did something called the Hoffman process. And that was I'd left the man I was about to marry. We had a child together, and 3 months out, we didn't, I left, we didn't get married. I went straight into another relationship, like literally 10 days later, first date, straight in. It was frying pan into fire. It was a horrendously toxic relationship, which lasted not quite a year. And that had me go and do the Hoffman process. And I was on the floor. I mean, I was just on the floor. I didn't know who I was. I suffered huge anxiety. I was just coming undone. And it was through doing that process and discovering, I had a huge spiritual awakening. And when I started to realize that it was the way I thought and that was creating the life I was living, and why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And when I realized how much wounding I had from childhood and how I hadn't quite overcome my mum's suicide and all the things, I realized it was time to just focus on me and nothing else. And it was the most, I mean, it almost actually brings tears to my eyes now, because it really does, because I still feel the power of that decision. It's like, no matter what, I am going to put me first. I'm going to be there for me. And I'm meant for more than the way I'm experiencing life, the way I'm experiencing relationships. Yes. I'm meant to be a better mom. I'm just meant to be more than I'm experiencing. So it's a very beautiful and powerful decision. I get very excited when a woman makes that decision, because it's,
And it was a big decision to do that, to really change. And what I noticed was that I started to attract a completely different set of people into my life when I did that. I suddenly was with all these very more spiritually aware people. We joined a meditation group that met on the beach. My yoga practice changed, and I have made some friends that are still my friends now. Things just shifted for me so much. And making a decision to come back to here, despite the ice cold weather, has been the right one. I've had my own journey here too, but that's when I did meet my now husband, and I found my soulmate.
Right. So how did that happen? You said you got a bit, you found yourself, it was a bit of a giggly moment when you realized that you were going to start looking on apps again.
I know.
Is that how you met him, or what happened?
I met him on Tinder, which is hilarious. Because I
thought Tinder was like for 20-year-olds.
I know. And I thought, I'll have a look. I had a few men chat to me on one or two other sort of things, and I was like, same. I haven't got to, and I noticed that I didn't put the energy in, and when that sort of pull to want to look at it was there, I was thinking, really haven't got the time for this. Come on, do something better with your life, kind of thing. But anyway, on Tinder, this guy pops up, and he looked sort of cute. So I thought, yeah, okay. And he kind of answered back, and he said, "Oh, I think you're a little out of my league. I'm not sure." And I said, "Oh no, I think it'll be fine. Let's meet." And of course, he's a cutie. And we met, and we went to an art gallery for the first date. And by the end of the day, we were there all day talking.
You're the second person I've spoken to on this interview series who had their first date in an art gallery.
I know. It says everything about the person you meet, and we drank coffee. Yeah. And then, of course, said to me, "I'd like to tell you some honest things about myself." And I was like, "Oh, my God." And of course, then he opens up about, well, he is bipolar, and he lives with that. And he explained to me that he'd had these issues, and he talked to me about this. And I was like, "Oh, okay." Because I was like, well, what do I know? I don't know anything. But it was just this open honesty when we met.
Available.
Yeah, totally available. And he'd been through his own. He'd probably come on the show and tell you what it's like from a man's perspective of what it was like.
That has to be the next series.
Many women who he said they were desperately looking for someone to save them. And he said, I couldn't. He said, my life has been a mess, and it has in places because of his illness been horrific. He's had some other quite serious neurological illnesses. And so he said, look at me and I'm not their savior. I don't have the big boat and the big house and the fancy this, that, and the other. So I was out the window straight away. And he said, and I felt so sad for them, because they were not happy.
But this is exactly what my husband said when he was doing online dating, and he was, he had very strict rules, like I think a 30-minute time limit, and he would know his intuition on whether it was the right woman or not. He said woman after woman, he knew that they were just looking to him to save them.
Yeah.
And he said he found it really sad as well. Yeah. And then I came along. I'd already saved myself. He was like, hooray.
Yeah, exactly. So we were dating, we were enjoying. I mean, he's had some problems in his life. And I said, well, I don't think you should be living in this cottage in the middle of the nowhere in the winter. I said, look, I've got the spare room. You can, whatever happens between us, I can't let you do that, because things were going a bit wrong. And I was like, well, for him. And I said, you can come and live. And of course the relationship grew, and then we realized there was Brexit, and he said to me, you're not leaving this country, I'm not losing you. There she goes. Mimi. Stila. And then my family have no boundaries.
Oh, that's fine.
And then really what happened was that he didn't want me to, obviously he was scared that I might have to leave, because we didn't know what was going to happen. And so we said, well, we'll be together. He said, look, we're getting married. He said, I'm not letting you go, kind of thing. So we didn't get married for roses and things, but obviously we were together and our relationship had been growing. But yes, then we got married. It sounds like a marriage of convenience, but it was really, he couldn't bear the thought of me leaving. And then, of course, it was never like that anyway, because it went on for years and years. But, it's been a different kind of relationship, a very much more equal relationship. He has two boys here who are younger than my son, but that's no issue. And we have both he and I have a great relationship with their mum. She doesn't live very far from us. And it's like I've gained a family without it needing to be that a family was imposed upon me in that way.
Yeah. Would you say you two began your relationship as friends then?
No, I think we were romantically very attracted.
Straight up. Okay, so when you offered the room to him, you would say you were in a relationship?
We would say we were in a relationship, but I was also felt like a friend, very concerned about where he was going to find himself. And he's been through a massive journey. I mean, he's a hero in my eyes, because I think to go through so much illness and so many issues and so much discrimination because of people's lack of understanding, that now he is in a much better space. And I can see him here, much happier, bobbing around. And obviously, he's a different person because of our relationship.
Yes. And, kind of tracking back to when we were talking about the idea of being a vibrational match to somebody, there you were all those years ago in Sydney in the Botanical Gardens doing your self-compassion work. And when you realized you had a very transactional relationship with people, and it was time to develop compassion. And here you attracted in this guy that required deep compassion.
Yes.
That maybe you would never have been able to have before you had it for yourself. And then, because we can't have it for someone else. And we can, but it can kind of become a little bit codependent, people pleasing if we don't have it for ourselves first.
Exactly. And I think when I saw that, it wasn't like, I have nothing to gain from him from a material perspective. It was a match of two people who wanted to be together for the right reasons. I wasn't expecting a baby. I wasn't desperate or in financial need or anything, but we are a very strong vibrational match. We are very forthright with each other in a way that I've never been in another relationship. Great. And he has taught me to speak up and set boundaries with others in ways that I have never done in my life before. Just say, and I'm learning just say no, because when you go up in the kind of relationships that my parents had and what I allowed to go on in other marriages, I didn't set strong enough boundaries. Even though I was strong in taking decisions and risks, my boundaries were poor, which they're not today.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. It sounds like, I mean, yeah, you're really taking care of each other, aren't you? And supporting each other.
Yes, definitely. And learning to, you know, how you kind of dance together, that there is this giving, this taking, that you listen to the other person. And I had some really awful habits, which he's pulled me up on. I used to be always on my phone, and he said to me, I'm not speaking to you if you don't put that away. So he said, I'm not having this conversation. And he said to me, you need to learn to look at me and put it, because you know how we get into those, and especially when you live alone, you build these habits. And he made me do that, and to be a much better communicator and someone who doesn't feel the need to be pulled by the sort of the phone and all that toxicity, and to say, hey, the sun's shining, let's go and do something else and be spontaneous, which has been a journey that I've not been very good at either, but I'm learning, is what I would say.
Oh, to be spontaneous. I could do with a little bit more spontaneity in my life, actually. Yeah. Yes.
He's very good at that. I'm not.
Is he? Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant. So what you're proving then is the importance of doing your own work to call in your match, and then also that match being somebody that you can, because of the work you've done, to then journey together. You know, because you've done that, what you've called in someone that is willing to continue to do the work with you, and you can continue to grow and evolve together. And you don't have to, and it proves you have to be perfect in advance. You know, you don't, it's not about achieving any level of perfection before you can be with them.
No. And I think what you're doing is, the relationship is so not built on just physical attraction. It's built on this meeting of minds and speaking to each other, talking to each other, listening to the things that he likes to do as much as the things that I like to do, and how we accommodate that within a relationship, you know?
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Really beautiful. Oh gosh, Clarissa, thank you so much for sharing your story with me and with all of us who've here. Who else is here live? There's a few people on live. Do you want to say a quick hello? And if you're watching the replay, please do type in #replay so I can keep track of who's been enjoying this series. Thank you so much, Clarissa. Just amazing. And do you guys think you'll end up, will you stay living where you are? Do you think you'll end up back in the UK?
No, we've now moved to this beautiful country property. We moved here in March. We're still in a building site, but we chose it together. And funnily enough, it was his ex-wife who found it. And she actually said, you guys should look at this place. So that's amazing. Really amazing. And we love it. Love being here. And we're building this kind of really the home we want in a kind of organic manner. And we're not, you know, one person deciding or the other deciding. This is kind of us together, building a new space. We won't leave here. He won't leave his boys, and I don't need to move from here. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you found your man. He sounds precious. Is he still playing music really loud in the background? No, I can't hear it. He's probably realized I'm on the thing now. No, he does that. That's just who he is. You know, get with it. He's got a big stereo and he has to play it. Amazing. Well, here's to you guys having many more incredible years together. How wonderful. How wonderful. Well, thank you again. And thank you, those of you who have been here live, or if you're watching the replay, thank you so much for joining us. I really hope, I know Clarissa's story will inspire you.
to what's possible. I just love hearing all these stories. It's so fun.
And
that's the end of the series for now, but I've got people approaching. It's so funny. I've got women now, they've been watching the series, like, can I come and share my story? Can I share my story? So I have a feeling this is going to grow arms and legs, and it would be really fun to have a chat with men as well, because I love getting the male perspective. I think it's, especially for a single woman, it's really important as part of our journey to hear a man's perspective and to witness, oh, there are empowered, amazing men in the world that are willing to do their work. And yeah, we kind of need role models of that too, don't we?
We do. We definitely
So watch
do.
this space. This might be growing arms and legs, this series. Okay, Clarissa, thanks again. Goodbye, everybody. Have a beautiful weekend. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.